Hey everybody, welcome back. Welcome back to American Battlefield Trust's coverage of Gettysburg 158. I'm Garry Adelman. We got Kris White behind the camera, who you're gonna see soon enough, and he just nodded to you there. And we've got a couple other guests here as well, continuing what we've been doing, bringing you stories of soldiers and units, and sometimes some of their objects here at Gettysburg. Now, I am in hopes, very much in hopes, that you've already seen our full 1 hour long march from Rock Creek up Culp's Hill and over and across other parts of the hill to some of the land, or near some of the land the Trust has preserved. So we really already covered July 2nd and elements of July 3rd. In other words, the fighting's already done, so if we don't do enough here, don't worry about it. We have that video. But let me orient you, because you can finally see it from where we stand because of the Gettysburg National Military Parks Foundation, partnership with the Gettysburg Foundation. We can now look through these woods. You can see lower Culp's Hill behind me that Kris is panning to. And as we move more over this way, you can see sort of the saddle between the two hills over here. And you can even from here see upper Culp's Hill over there. This is something you haven't been able to see from here in the summer in a century. So my compliments to the park and the foundation for the great work that they're doing here. So, what I would just say is that we're talking about July 3rd on Culp's Hill. Elsewhere on the battlefield, they fought for an hour, they fought for 2 hours. Here they fought on the night of July 2nd, we've already covered that. And then on the morning of July 3rd for 7 hours. Okay, and to talk more about that fighting and to hopefully have a little wow moment for one of our guests, and before we show you some more cool objects from the Battle of Gettysburg, let's bring on Kris White here, who's going to hand the camera off to Annalise.
All right, thanks, Garry. And we do hope that you checked out our other July 2nd Culp's Hill video. We do talk about the fighting on the 3rd here at Gettysburg as well. But just to talk a little bit about what's going on, let's go from what I always call the 50,000 to the 500. On the evening of July 2nd, the division, or at least 3/4 of the division of Edward Allegheny Johnson, attacks Culp's Hill. It's held by about 1,400 New Yorkers under the command of George Sears Greene. Greene will be here throughout the battle, though his men will shift around a little bit. Greene's a very interesting man. To make a long story short, he's from Rhode Island, born in 1801. He will go off to West Point, where he graduates with Lorenzo Thomas, and he'll graduate with a guy named Hannibal Day, who fights over in the wheat field. And then he is going to go stay in the Army. Tragically, he'll lose his wife and his 3 children to disease while he's in the Army. Leave the Army, eventually gets remarried, and then has a number of children. He'll have one daughter who helps take care of him throughout his life, but she's also related to Hannibal Day, his classmate here at Gettysburg, who's fighting here at Gettysburg, because that's her father-in-law. She marries into the Day family. Then he will have a son. You may have be familiar with the USS Monitor and Lieutenant Greene, who's on that ship. And that will be his son, who becomes the executive officer of the Monitor and takes over during the battle in March of 1862. Another one of his sons will be here on Culp's Hill with him and be one of his aides and serve up through 1864 when he's wounded and leaves the service. His last son will actually go to West Point, graduate in 1870, go on to serve in the Army, in and out of the Army, will go on to be an observer of the Russo-Turkish War. He'll figure out to take up cobblestone streets in New York and pave flats. But ironically, he is, during the Spanish-American War, Thomas Greene is going to serve under a Confederate general named Fitzhugh Lee. Lee will enter United States service and serve during the Spanish-American War. So Greene has a long lineage with his second family, as it were, and Greene served up here on July 2nd and 3rd. So that's just one of our soldier stories that we have from up here. But to get you oriented to where we are from the 50,000 down to the 500 very quickly, on the evening of July 2nd, Johnson attacked the hill. The hill is going to remain in Union hands. Now, Robert E. Lee, on the morning of July 3rd, decides that he is going to renew his attacks. His first attack will take place here at Culp's Hill. He will attack again down where we were at Devil's Den, the wheat field, and Little Round Top. He wants James Longstreet to renew his attack. Now, Longstreet feels that his men, his 14,000 or so men, which are now depleted down to about 8,000 or so, are too worn out and does not attack. But on this side of the Confederate line, on the east side of Gettysburg, we'll have Richard Ewell, Old Dick Ewell, one-leg Ewell. Will be out here, 47 years young, Virginia native. He will be out here and reinforcing the Culp's Hill area. The Confederates on the evening of July 2nd came very close to capturing the Baltimore Pike, which is the lifeline of George Gordon Meade's army. George Gordon Meade has to defend 2 cities, Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland. Those are his orders. And the direct route of communication and the direct road to Baltimore is obviously the Baltimore Pike. Meade on the evening of July 2nd decides, I'm going to stay and fight it out. He's going to stay here at Gettysburg and then reinforce this sector, as does Robert E. Lee. So this side of the battlefield will grow in size and shape. More Union 12th Corps troops will arrive here around midnight, July 2nd to the 3rd, and they'll look around us. They'll look up onto Lower Culp's Hill, where they had these nice fortifications, and as they try to approach them, they're getting shot at. They think it might be some Union soldiers. It's not. Those are George Maryland Stuarts, North Carolinians, Virginians, and Marylanders. They don't get along very well, so Maryland Stuart is going to put the 1st Maryland between his Virginians and his North Carolinians. Keep the kids separated. That's what we'll do on some of our battlefields. So he will have men up there. Now the 12th Corps will have to retake their trenches. And in some of the land the American Battlefield Trust has helped to preserve over at Powers Hill, we'll have artillery who can fire over to this area. We'll also have an attack plane that'll be in behind us, where Union 12th Corps and 6th Corps troops will come up here and attack on July 3rd. Members of the Trust are helping to preserve that land right now. So we have all kinds of different things happening here. So the Union Army will renew their attack, will attack Culp's Hill around 4 to 4:30 on the morning of July 3rd. Let's flip to the Confederate side very quickly. What Richard Ewell is now supposed to do is try to take Culp's Hill and keep pushing in. We think that there's a pressure applied to both sides of the Union line. That's not going to be the case. But Ewell will go for broke. He'll have men on the north side of the hill, and that will be under the command of John Jones. Jones is actually wounded in the brigade, in the action before, and a guy named Robert Dungan will be in charge of his brigade. Going up to the top slope of the Culp's Hill will be the 42nd Virginia Infantry with 4 Dosses in that regiment. And a shout out to Richard Chapman for reminding me of this. Desmond Doss from Hacksaw Ridge fame has 4 ancestors fighting here right on Culp's Hill. One, Thomas, is killed in action on the morning of July 3rd. He also has some members of the 44th Virginia, which are also serving up in John Jones's brigade. Rum Jones is his nickname, John Marshall Jones, because he likes to drink. The next brigade coming down in line will be Frank Nichols' brigade, commanded by Jesse Williams. Frank Nichols is going to lose a foot, an eye, and an arm during the war. After the war, he'll run for an office of governorship of New Orleans, and his soldiers said, "We will vote for whatever's left of him." So Williams, Jesse Williams will be leading Nichols' brigade up the hill. That's the steepest part of Culp's Hill. Now we get down into the money section. This area we're in, this saddle, this is where the Confederates can make headway, because they said they needed scaling ladders to get up upper Culp's Hill. Now down through here, we're going to see the brigades of Junius Daniel. Junius Daniel will be in behind us. He fought on July 1st. You heard about him in some of our earlier videos. Then we'll also have the brigade of George Maryland Stuart, his mixed brigade. They will be over in this section. Then on the other side of him will be Extra Billy Smith's small brigade. Extra Billy Smith, he gets a nickname Extra Billy because he was skimming from the taxpayers. But Billy Smith's brigade's down in that area near Spangler Spring. And then up into this area, we will have a brigade that was left out on July 2nd. July 2nd, if you watched our last video, you found out that Allegheny Ed Johnson came up 1 brigade short because there were some pesky Union horsemen out on a place called Brinkerhoff's Ridge. And he had to leave 1 brigade, the famed Stonewall Brigade, out in that sector. On the morning of July the 3rd, a portion, 4 regiments of the 5 Stonewall Brigade regiments, commanded by James Walker, nicknamed Stonewall Jim, because he challenged Stonewall Jackson to a duel. Hates Stonewall Jackson, my kind of man. Comes right up through here. They come right up through here, and that'll include every regiment of the Stonewall Brigade, the 27th, the 33rd Virginia, the 4th and 5th Virginia, except for the 2nd. The 2nd famously has Wesley Culp's in its ranks, and they are fighting over on the Zephram Tawney farm at this point on the morning of July 3rd. Is Culp dead at this point? We don't know. There's a lot of speculation. He could have been killed on the 2nd. He could have been killed on the 3rd. A lot of speculation with that. So this is what we're starting to see here. We have a mass amount of troops coming up here. We even have some Alabamians under the command of Edward O'Neill, who didn't do very well on the first day. Check out that video. But this is what Ewell is now going to do. On the evening of July 1st, he said, man, we can't attack on my side of the field. Now on the morning of July the 3rd, Robert E. Lee says, tough, reinforce, and attack Culp's Hill. 7 hours of fighting, more than 200,000 rounds of ammunition will be expended by John White Garry's division alone. This is going to be a very tough battle and the Confederates are going to have a tough nut to crack.
Good, and if I may, real quick, first of all, I'm already seeing some hashtags for, Kris said that there was an attack plane. That's not what he meant. He means plane spelled in a different way. Two, let me just say that, this is the story of the Battle of Gettysburg we keep seeing. The Confederates made some gains, and they brought 3 more brigades to this fight on July 3rd, but the Union got their 5 brigades back, plus 4 more for good measure. That's what the Confederates are facing at Gettysburg. And let me reintroduce our friend, Ancestry Ann here. Ann Mitchell, a family historian at Ancestry, who made specific shirts just for this purpose. Check it out, Ancestry Fold 3 t-shirts with the Gettysburg battlefield and the troop lines on them. And you just heard from Kris that right there, your ancestor was charging up Culp's Hill. Reaction? And who was he, if you know?
These would be the Donalds. The Donalds, this would be John and Benjamin Donald. They lived in Lexington, Virginia. They were born there. One of them died there. The other one, well, we'll get to him in a second. They signed up for the 27th. The 27th Virginia, you know what they went through, but here it sounds like that's amazing. They both survived the war, but they spent at the last year of it at Camp Chase. John went back to Lexington. He ended up drowning in the Buffalo River. Benjamin was court-martialed at one point. We don't know why, because all those records have been burned in Richmond. But he moved out to Texas and he was murdered. He was shot dead in the street. He was the troublemaker. That's all we know. But to know that this is where they were, I mean, how does anybody come out of this and be the same? It's just not possible. It is. I'm having another chill moment, Garry.
Good, I'm glad, because I can almost see, I hope you can too maybe, you can almost see some of the movements over here, and that's why it's important that this ground has been cleared. And I want to just do one more thing impromptu, because we got to get moving again, but just real quick, I mean, you're not the first person to do research at your place of business, it happens to be, and find maybe something you don't want to find. Your ancestor ran away, was a thief, wasn't married when he or she said they were. Do you experience that a lot at Ancestry?
We experience that all the time at Ancestry. I mean, sometimes I find slave owners in my family. I find all sorts of difficult things. People, maybe they deserted the war. Maybe they committed crimes. Maybe they were wonderful people. But what I usually find, people aren't black and white. They aren't good. They aren't bad. They're flawed, just like we all are. And you just take them as who they were. You look at the times that they lived in. And these were the times these men lived in. And you can't judge them. You can only learn about their lives and make sure that those stories are told, because it takes 7 generations for all that stuff to flow down to you, and it will have an effect on you, whether the words are ever spoken or whether the stories are ever spoken.
Here, if we could ever need anything now, it's to not judge
Amen.
the people of the past too harshly in this environment we're in right now. They're not perfect, and neither are you. Kris, I think we're going to walk up top now. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm going to grab the camera for
Okay.
Annalise and give it back here. I'll do a quick walk and talk. Yeah, out in this area, the Union soldiers talk about building earthen fortifications, and we're coming up to a dip in those fortifications, which are still here, at least remnants of them, and they've been improved over the years. But the Union soldiers come out here, they start clearing the trees that were out here. You would have had hogs and cows keeping down the undergrowth, so it would have been more of an open forest at the time. And when they go into this open forest, they find a wagon that had been abandoned out here. It looked like it was a post wagon that would carry mail or telegraphs or things like that. And don't know if it came here because the Confederates showed up or because someone had, ditched it out here prior to the battle for another reason. But they do find that. And this is the area where George Stuart's men on the evening of July 2nd will come up into and attack the 137th New York. Would be actually facing part of the 137th New York. As you're looking ahead, you see John White Garry and his monument. Garry's one of 6 future governors of Pennsylvania who served in the Civil War. 3 of them have ties here to Gettysburg. James Beaver, Samuel Pennypacker, and then John White Garry. And as we come up here, this would have been a fortification known as a traverse. And this traverse would have been very important. This is where the 137th New York fell back to. This will be a defensive line. And then as we look up, we'll see different units here. The 7th Ohio, the 137th New York, the 149th New York, which was commanded by Henry Barnum, who was wounded at Malvern Hill, and who will actually name his kid Malvern Hill Barnum after the place where he was wounded. So there's all kinds of stories here on Culp's Hill. If you haven't got out here before, you need to come over to Culp's Hill.
All right, good. Thanks so much, Kris. I know he's handing the camera back again. We're gonna, I think, seek out our good friend, Carol Reardon, Gettysburg Foundation, Gettysburg College, and of course, expert on all things everything. And she always, there she is. How shy she is as well. We get along really well. Dr. Carol Reardon.
Hi there. Welcome back. So you've been down in the valley between Lower Culp's Hill and Upper Culp's Hill. And I remember a time when I first started coming down here when there was just a Culp's Hill. And we didn't really differentiate between upper and lower very much. Thanks to Harry Fons and his important books on the fighting here, we've gotten a lot more comfortable with differentiating between Upper Culp's Hill and Lower Culp's Hill. Most of the attention, and especially a lot of the clearing, has been done on Upper Culp's Hill, and that's a wonderful thing for all of us who try to interpret the past and try to preserve these battlefields in as much of an 1863 way as we can. This is just awesome. But of course, I'm the one who always finds that small little piece that needs a little bit more attention, and so I've been paying a little bit more attention to Lower Culp's Hill. I'm suspecting that a lot of you who have come here have spent a lot less time here than you have on Little Round Top or the field of Pickett's Charge or something like that. And part of that reason is because here on Culp's Hill, it's awfully difficult to figure out who's doing what to whom and when. Well, there's fighting here on late on July 2nd, and then on early morning, almost till noon on July 3rd. And the fights, those two different fights aren't always between the same troops each time. There's different players, different ways. And if you come here and you see the great profusion of monuments around here, it's really difficult to differentiate whether they're talking about July 2nd, July 3rd, and what part of July 3rd they mean. So it gets very confusing, but tell you what, it's to your great benefit, it's to your great advantage to take the time to sit down and to try to figure out what's July 2nd and what's July 3rd. Here's a recommendation next time you come. When you want to think about July 2nd, come in on East Confederate and make one whole loop around here just focusing on July 2nd and go through the Confederate main line at the bottom of the hill and figure out in your mind, work it out in your mind, what part of this was July 2nd. When you come back to do it on July 3rd, come in from the Baltimore Pike, go down through Spangler Spring and come up here again. And if you do it two different ways, sometimes you can figure out exactly what's going on. Now, you know, oftentimes when I show up on the screen, there's a soldier's story I want to tell. And because we pay so much attention to Upper Culp's Hill, I want to tell you the story about a private who fought down on Lower Culp's Hill. There's nothing special about him. He is everyman. But that's probably one of the reasons why I like him. If I wasn't telling you about him today, it is entirely possible you would never hear about Private William C. Paul. He's from the area around Hillsborough, North Carolina, an area that was not strongly in favor of secession, but on July 20th, 1861, 18-year-old William Paul enlisted in a company that became Company D of the 1st North Carolina Infantry. He was not always physically strong enough to stay out in the field. There were a few times that he had to go on sick leave, but he returned to the ranks probably earlier than he should, to participate in the Pennsylvania campaign with his comrades in arms. What he did on this day is a little bit buried in mystery, as so many things are on this battlefield. Where is his regiment going to be? Well, it's going to be down on Lower Culp's Hill, the part that I like to pay attention to right now. When we talk about Lower Culp's Hill, we tend to focus on the Maryland Confederates who are here. They're such an unusual story in themselves. But to the right flank of the Marylanders was the 3rd North Carolina Infantry, and on their left flank was the 1st, and William Paul is with the 1st North Carolina. So either on the night of the 2nd or early on the 3rd, Private Paul in Company D of the 1st North Carolina came up the slopes, attacking in this direction up on Lower Culp's Hill. He was hit by some kind of a projectile in the abdomen. Apparently it was not a penetrating wound, it was more of a scrape. They didn't see it as something that was immediately fatal or anything like that. My sense is that he probably got wounded fairly early in the action, because he was able to be removed from the battlefield and taken to the hospital of Stewart's Brigade. It was on Martin Sheeler's farm. It's back behind Confederate lines. There he will be taken prisoner after the Union Army leaves here and the Provost Guard takes over all the Confederate hospitals. Private Paul will become a prisoner of war. Whatever kind of injury he had suffered became infected, and on the 24th of July, Private Paul will die. He'll be buried underneath a fruit tree. His grave was marked. And in 1872, when the Southern women's groups paid to have Southern graves, Southern remains disinterred and taken back south, he was still in a recognized grave. We know that his remains were put into specific boxes that were then taken down and reburied down in Hollywood Cemetery down in Richmond. So we actually know a good deal about what happened to him here. And it's a story very much like that others went through. Well, it's going to take a while for this news to get back to Hillsborough. All his family would have known was that he was wounded and left in Pennsylvania when Lee's army returned to Virginia. Imagine trying to find out what had happened. We don't know how his family found out what happened. But the obituary was published in the Hillsborough, North Carolina newspaper on September 9th. So somehow, some way, took a couple of months, but the word got back. It's one of those obituaries that's kind of typical for its age. It's not just simply one or two lines. It really addresses the character so that his neighbors and friends can appreciate the full nature of the loss here. It's not just a number on a ledger. It was a real person. They pointed out that when the call was first made for volunteers, William Paul was among the first to respond to that call. He was a youth of great integrity and purity of character. His physical endurance was wonderful. He had gone through marches, endured exposure, suffered hardship, and all without uttering a complaining word. Always bright and cheerful, prompt in the discharge of duty, fearless on the field of battle, and high-toned and honorable in all his relations with men and officers, his comrades in arms genuinely regretted his loss. There was always either some biblical quotation or some kind of a quotation, it seemed, that would sum up what had happened. And here it said, "Death, it is said, ever selects a shining mark." And just in a very small obituary. And this is what an obituary would look like in a Civil War newspaper. More than one column. You can see that it's pretty much put out there for all the neighbors to see. And you can see a lot of these newspapers by taking a look at using our friends from Ancestry and Fold 3 and some of these other partners with us this weekend. You can go back and you can find some of these things as well. Private Paul is one of many Confederate casualties on this hill. For years and years, this was always a part of the battlefield that people didn't make time to. If you only had a short amount of time, this is the part that you skipped over. Don't skip it over. Next time you're here, make a point of coming here. Come here on more than one occasion. Follow the second day route, follow the third day route. Approach it from different directions. Take advantage of the wonderful changes that have happened up here on the hill to reopen up the terrain. And just like me, if a day goes by and I don't learn something new about Gettysburg, I'm not doing my job. I give you the same challenge, so you get out there and do the same thing. Here comes Kris now.
Carol, that was awesome. We appreciate it. And I'm glad she brought up Hillsborough, North Carolina. We were just down there, Garry and myself, talking about a lot of our Revolutionary War items to go on at Guilford Courthouse, the pre-revolution at Adelman. So check out all those videos over on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. And, she's bringing up some really great items here for us to talk about, and we're standing beside the 7th Ohio Infantry. So I'm going to bring David Malgee back on here to talk a little bit about the 7th Ohio. He has something, I don't know what he has, but they're going to surprise me with it. But the 7th Ohio, just to show you their monument very quickly, we're standing beside the Ohio Monument. One of the things they think of with the 12th Corps here is that they are a Western unit because they have the 3rd Wisconsin, the 27th Indiana, which is some of the tallest men in the entire Union Army. They're giants. And then you have the 5th Ohio, 7th Ohio, you have the 29th, the 66th Ohio. So you have a lot of different Ohio regiments out here, so they think that they're Western. But the 7th Ohio, if you've checked out our videos when Garry and I went to Kentucky and West Virginia, you would have heard a lot about the 7th Ohio at the Battle of Kessler's Cross Lanes, which is in the Gauley River Valley when we go out that way into West Virginia. We shot that video with you in the pouring down rain. But the 7th Ohio starts off as a 3-month regiment and then converts to a 3-year regiment. Their colonel is from Pittsburgh, where I'm from, but ends up going up to Cleveland and becomes a printer in one of the Cleveland newspapers. His name is William Crichton. Crichton is well regarded with his men. He fights well at Kessler's Crosslanes, even though they were driven off at overwhelming losses. The unit will go on to be merged with the Army of the Potomac in the week before the Battle of Antietam, and they will join the newly formed 12th Corps. They'll fight at Antietam, they'll come here to Gettysburg, then they'll head out west, and they will fight at places like Lookout Mountain, Ringgold, which is just devastating to these men. And William Crichton, it is said, before he goes into every battle, is going to crow like a rooster. When he'll get up and either flap his arms and crow like a rooster, it shows up in their regimental history. So it's his way to get his men up and fighting. In fact, Annalise, if we walk this way, you will see on the back side of their monument a rooster. So there's the rooster that even made it onto the monument here at, and Carol is playing a rooster for us. So, there you go. Gary can be happy. I did it for him.
Kris is kind of doing it right
Yeah.
there too. Maybe we'll close this video with everybody doing it. You hear that?
Yeah. So they're going to be up here on July 3rd. Now, the 12th Corps throughout the battle is going to move around a lot. They're going to end up over on Benner's Hill. They'll end up on Powers Hill. They'll end up down at Little Round Top. They'll be on CULP'S Hill, Lower CULP'S Hill. They're all over the place. They're called all over the field. And the 7th Ohio will be moving up and down this hill, just like a lot of folks. They'll move into the trenches off to my right, fire, 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 and then fall back on the other side of a small hillock where they'll clean their weapons, replenish their ammunition, and a new regiment would come up, fire, 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 and then they would just keep this cat and mouse game up throughout the day. That's how we keep up a constant stream of fire. But that's the 7th Ohio, a veteran regiment out here by 1863, and I know David has something to show us.
And I want you to stick close by, Kris, because I understand that you love this regiment and that you're going to love this artifact.
And by the way, David Malgee on the board of the Gettysburg Foundation, past interim president.
All right, so Kris talked a little bit about Colonel Crichton and his actions leading his roosters, as they called his men, into battle. They were known as the Rooster Regiment. It was pretty well known, these antics, that not only Crichton, but I think some of his other officers sometimes did as well.
Yeah.
And actually, I want to read to you, before I show this artifact, an account of William Crichton's death on November 27th at the Battle of Ringgold. And this is by a witness. And this is what this witness says. His regiment was called the Rooster Regiment. They all wore a silver badge of a rooster on their coat lapels, and whenever they went into a fight, the colonel would flap his arms and crow like a rooster, and the boys would also crow. At Ringgold, the colonel had just purchased an elegant uniform, and he looked fine. While leading our brigade, that is Candy's, in action, he was near his old regiment when the colonel and Lieutenant Colonel Crane of the 7th Ohio both got up on a rock, flapped their arms, and crowed. And this was the occasion on which William Crichton was killed. It mentions that the regiment wore silver lapel pins. And in fact, I have Kris, a silver lapel pin, a rooster pin that was found right here at Gettysburg on the line of 7th Ohio many, many years ago. You can see the silver just leaking through a little bit. Let's get a little bit closer.
I've seen these in books. I've never seen one in person.
They're extremely rare, and I'm told by other collectors that indeed this is something that is one of the most sought after badges of the Civil War era. So that is the Rooster badge. I want you to hold it for a little while, if you could, Kris, while I move on to a couple other artifacts.
Can I ask you one question
Yes,
about Crane and Crichton? Which I believe they would be a great buddy movie. There's so many good buddy movies that could come out of the Civil War. But what I want to know is, I heard the story that Crane was killed first at Ringgold, and then Crichton, yes, I got him right. Crichton went to retrieve the body, and then that is when he was shot and killed. Is that true?
I'm asking
Kris. That is what I've heard as well. I don't know if it's true or not, but that is definitely what was passed down.
And don't you think they'd make a great buddy movie?
I think it would.
The two of them are just characters.
I could see the sitcom music, do.
Right.
So just real quick, before we move on, we have a little bit more on the 7th Ohio, real quick, if you don't mind, David.
Yes.
And I just want to say that if you like the 7th Ohio, if I'm correct, Go back to our video on Kessler's Cross Lanes. Is that where?
Someone may have already promoted that on this video.
Oh, he
but
did,
I'm
and I
not
was walking
100%
away.
Sure.
Okay. Well, we're not. I won't get into that. Okay. My apologies. In any case, there is a soldier named Charles Carroll who's fighting here in the 7th Ohio, and 7th Ohio saw some casualties, but they only saw one person killed and one person mortally wounded. Ann?
I want to tell you the story of Charles Carroll, and I think this is a just emblematic story of the loss, not just on the field, but the loss at home. Charles Carroll was married. He had 4 children. Well, he had 3 children. He had a son Charles, a son Willard, and a son James Monroe. In March of 1863, his son Willard passes away. As we know, or maybe you don't, Charles Carroll came here with the 7th Ohio. He was fighting. He was shot and killed on July 3rd. So we know that. We have his records. We have his wife's widow's pension, sorry. It's hot out here. I'm getting my words turned around. But then, 4 days later, July 7th, his youngest child, a daughter, is born. It's his only daughter. And she was born 4 days later. A few months later, one of his sons dies, James Monroe. There are only 2 children left. Martha, his wife, is left with 2 children and all that grief in 1863. Can you imagine? This is the cost of the Civil War. It's not just out here on the field. It's not the blood and the carnage and all of that. It's the broken hearts and broken homes at home and the lives that just change forever because of a moment that happens out here on the field.
That's great, Ann, and that's one of the reasons we're so happy to have all of our guests here, because we can tell a more complete story with the objects and with the genealogy and whatnot. And, enough of, even though the tragic death of Charles, enough of his kids lived so that there was one of his descendants, Paul Stewart Button, and then his children and great-grandchildren told the story of Charles Carroll. I want to thank the trust friend Walt for bringing this story to our attention in the first place, and with the note that you have helped. You all, our supporters, have helped us to save a good deal of land around Culp's Hill, on Wolf's Hill, along the Baltimore Pike, and really at the base of Culp's Hill right now is our current effort. Let me turn it back over to Kris or David, whoever wants it.
Okay, thanks, Gary. So I've got just a couple more artifacts related to the fighting at Culp's Hill, and I'm gonna, I guess, Jeremy, why don't you come up, or Kris, one or the other. This is really stable, so if you want to just hold this and show our viewers. This is a very rare artifact picked up off the battlefield here on Culp's Hill immediately following the battle. It's an 1858 pattern state-purchased militia cartridge box. It has a beautiful Maryland state seal box plate. It also has the russet pre-war strap. There were 2,000 to 3,000 Marylanders on the field at Gettysburg. There are a couple of well-known regiments that went head-to-head here on Culp's Hill on July 2nd. The 1st Maryland Eastern Shore, which was a U.S. regiment, volunteer regiment, and then also the 1st Battalion, Maryland Battalion CSA, which we know from their monument today as the 2nd Maryland. I like to think that this cartridge box, which is unidentified to a particular individual, was a witness to that fighting on July 2nd, where famously Grace, the dog, the mascot of the 1st Maryland Battalion, was killed. Either way, it represents, to me, a state that is torn by the American Civil War, much as Ann was just talking about, and how families were disrupted. The state was disrupted. I want to read to you a excerpt from the writings of Colonel James Wallace of the Union 1st Maryland. He wrote that the 1st Maryland Confederate Regiment met us and were cut to pieces. We sorrowfully gathered up many of our old friends and acquaintances and had them carefully and tenderly cared for. Included among the dead was the battalion's mascot, a dog named Grace, and we've talked a little bit about that. But this is a very rare artifact. It's in great shape. Kris, is there anything you'd like to say about it, particularly?
Yeah, what's great about these, the cartridge box here, the plates actually have a purpose. So whenever you get a new cartridge box, whenever you open this up, this leather is not going to be worked well with, so it's going to kind of flop open. So we're going to identify soldiers with this, and it'll be an identification for units. We have the generic CS or US, but these are weighted lead normally. And what they will do is actually, when you open up your cartridge box, that lead will, or this weighted lead will close the cartridge box. meaning that it will keep it closed from flames coming over top of your shoulder when you discharge a black powder musket. So they actually serve a practical purpose. You can strap it closed down here. You can see that the leather has given way a little bit, but we have the ball that you could put it onto. We have a second interior box lid. That's again to help protect what's inside the box. Here we can hold, this is for our sergeant's tool or anything else we need to have in here, cleaning patches or whatnot. This would actually be very, very heavy to wear. On the strap itself, you're going to see two holes. These two holes were actually showing me that there was once a breastplate on here, because they would have these small eye hooks on the back. You would cut this through with a small knife. You would then put the breastplate on here. This is the side the breastplate would have been on. I can see where the lead once was. And on the back, or I'm sorry, we have it on the, I have it reversed. Here's where we have it. You can see it there. On the back, I can see this is where they actually tied it together. They would have probably used leather or something else. You can see the impression because this will be so tight on there that we've actually made a small impression here, and that is what would hold on the breastplate at this point. So on the back side here, you can actually see the circle of the old lead that was on here and on this side. So at one point, this was actually switched around. It was reversed. So the black should have been out. The brown is now out. And if you've ever put one of these together, if you're a reenactor, putting these straps on here is a real pain in the butt because you're usually working with leather that has not been well worked with yet. So it can take a little bit, and you can see how they're crossed in the back. Doing it the proper way is really a pain, but it's an awesome artifact.
Yeah, and it leads me to believe, Kris, I don't know what your thoughts are, that this may have been worn by a Confederate soldier because the eagle breastplate would have been taken off. Yep. A lot of people didn't like those because it was a perfect target area. Whoa, about to fall off the mound here. Hope you viewers enjoyed that. So, you know, who knows? But it's a great artifact and certainly a witness to the fighting here on CULP'S Hill. Then I have one last artifact, which is very rusted out. Apparently it looks like a cavalry saber. I'm told, and I'm not an expert in this, so I'm going to defer to Kris, that this started life as, and you can't see the blade because it's stuck in the scabbard, rusted in the scabbard, but it started life as an 1840 artillery saber, and then was later reworked by a Confederate arsenal to put on a model 1860 light cavalry hilt, which indicates that it may have changed hands and then was again reworked by a Confederate arsenal. This also appears to have been projectile struck, not very hard, but enough to bend the scabbard a little bit. This was actually ended up in Rock Creek at the base of an old log footbridge that would lead over to Wolf Hill, and it ended up in the collection of a gentleman named John Geiselman, who's kind of a legend in Gettysburg. He had a collection that he started as a little boy. He was for 50 years a janitor at Gettysburg High School, and yet he turned out to be one of the great collectors of the modern era. He died actually on 9/11, 2001, and his collection came onto the market. He would always identify his artifacts with a little round circle in white, a sticker with a number on it. So this came straight out of the Geiselman collection, and more than anything, just represents an artifact that didn't get picked up after the fighting was over. And a fellow named Charles Cook, a local resident, actually eyeballed this while crossing that log bridge over Rock Creek. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly when it was, but it must not have been, you know, I'm guessing within 20 or 30 years after the battle. Who knows? At any rate, it's just an artifact of the fighting. By the way, it's tempting to think that there were artillery units or cavalry units here, but it certainly quite often infantry officers, including Thomas Livermore of the 5th New Hampshire, would actually utilize cavalry sabers, or specifically cavalry sabers, as a sidearm. So anyway, just an interesting artifact from CULP'S Hill. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it.
It's awesome.
All right.
This is what we would have been nicknamed a wrist breaker because it's so heavy. And this is actually, coming off of what David said, this is what Francis Barlow would carry. So if you ever saw Francis Barlow, little waif of a man, he has this massive sword. And he would use the flat of the sword to hit men on their backsides or other places like that. To see it reworked is really cool. As soon as I saw it, I said, that's 1840, but man, they have a wood handle on this one that's intricately carved here. You can see it's worn over time, and it's not uncommon to have the bottoms of these dented because of projectiles, or because these hang so low, they will bump into everything. These are a pain to wear as an officer. So you would find these, but this one actually looks like, just from the way it's hit, it's a projectile. It would have hit it.
But to Chris's point, if you find a cavalry saber that's been used in service, typically you will find a man-made dent here, which literally held the saber in place, so when they rode along, it wouldn't bounce up and down and make a lot of noise. Was I incorrect, Kris, that this is an 1860 adder to it? Is this?
It looks 1840 to me, but I can't say 100% without looking at some of my.
Welcome to the Antiques Roadshow.
Yeah. So I think that's our cue to get off screen and move on. So
on the market, it would fetch.
yes. Yeah.
Good. Well, what I want to say is, first of all, unbelievable artifacts, unbelievable stories. Thanks so much to David and to Carol. And Kris, you're adding so much. I mean, could you imagine? I swear, Kris had no idea which artifacts we were pulling out until they were handed to him, or until we started talking about them. And I just can't say enough how proud we are at the Trust to have, someone with so much knowledge about all that. Anything else to add, Kris?
No. Come to CULP'S Hill. We love CULP'S Hill.
We love CULP'S Hill. Are you going out, or are you taking it out?
Oh.
Because I would love it if we could come over and just check out some of these earthworks, just so you know. There are the actual remnants that were of the earthworks dug by George Sears Green's men, and maybe improved by others. And you're looking at it. It doesn't look like much, but maybe Kris will take us out with a moment of Zen, and you can see more from going up the hill. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for supporting Battlefield Preservation.